Hello and welcome to the Raising Kellen podcast. My name is Marsh Naidu and I blog at raisingkellen.org, where we curate resources for families experiencing disabilities. Guys, today I am joined by Michaela Barnett, who is running for Congresswoman in East Tennessee. Now, if you guys want to check out Michaela's platform, please go to michaelafortennessee.com. Other than that, grab that cup of coffee, put your feet up, and get ready for some awesome conversation. Michaela, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I am really looking forward to the conversation we're going to have today and spending some time with you this morning.
You as well, Michaela, you as well. To start off, can you let listeners know a little bit about your history? I've kind of heard that you're a scientist and you're a small business owner, but very much interested in your skill set that aligns you running for Congresswoman.
Absolutely. Thanks for that question, because it can be quite a swing to run for the U.S. House of Representatives your first time running for office. And I understand that there can be some hubris there. But for me, it's very clear that we need new leaders in Congress, in our seat of power. And the reason that I think I can be one of those leaders is because last year I worked as a Congressional Science Policy Fellow in the office of Congressman Paul Tonko, covering 8 different policy portfolio issue areas. So I sometimes talk with people and they say, what makes you think you can do the job? And the answer is that when you work as a congressional staff member or a congressional policy fellow, you are writing bills and speeches and talking points and amendments to support your members' work. But beyond that, I'm really a lifelong problem solver, and I am someone that has never accepted the response and logic of that's just the way things are. Anytime anyone says that to me, I always think, well, but do they have to be? What if they were different? I mean, we're seeing so many huge problems that feel very overwhelming. And the truth is that they will be unsolvable if all of us take the attitude that this is just the way things are and this is the fate that's been assigned to us, instead of realizing that we have power as citizens, as advocates, as people with influence in our own systems. So I have a PhD in civil engineering from the University of Virginia. I went back to school to really understand how human behavior intersects with engineering and design problems. While I was getting my PhD, I realized that I wanted to move beyond academia. I think that the work that our scientists and researchers are doing is so important. But for me, I wanted to move beyond someone studying problems to someone solving them, which is why I started my small business, KNOXFILL, 5 years ago, which is a community refillery and really hub for sustainability here in East Tennessee. And the same driving passion is why I went to DC. To better understand the levers of power that we can pull to solve the problems that we care most about.
So who is Michaela? Are you single? I know this is the mom questions. Are you single? Are you married?
I am very proudly married. My husband, Max Ferrari, is a brilliant partner in this life who, when we first met, we've been together 10 years, which is quite crazy. But I remember that one of our first conversations, he told me, I want to bring the green energy revolution back to Latin America. He's from Argentina, grew up in Colombia. And I said, sold, done. And he works at the National Lab here in East Tennessee and does phenomenal work for communities around energy access and justice and making our grid systems more resilient. We do not have kids, but we are the proud aunt and uncle, or tíos in Spanish, to 11 nieces and nephews that are just my my full heart, and I could tear up a little bit, but they are the reason why I really fight so hard so that the next generation has better outcomes than we have and more opportunity. And isn't that always what we want for the
Absolutely.
next generation?
100%. Yeah.
I feel very lucky to be the Tia to so many amazing kids, and I want them to have the whole world and more.
Now, Knoxville, right? For those that may not be familiar with it, what is Knoxville?
Yeah, so it's so funny because sometimes when people introduce me, they'll say, "This is Michaela. She runs Knoxville," and that F and that V sound kind of similar, and so they'll say, "You run Knoxville," and I said, "Well, not yet, no." um, Knoxville, it's a refillery, and so what that is a place that you can bring your own containers and get everything from shampoo to laundry detergent to deodorant to teas and spices and oils. Anything that you get right now in a single-use plastic container, just about, you could get a refillable version at Knoxville. And then we also, we source as many of our products locally and regionally as possible. So we're investing back in our community's economy and making sure that the supply chain is really regenerative and sustainable and low waste too. It's not just that we're getting products in bulk. We make sure that we're sourcing from folks that, are treating their people well, are paying them good wages, are using high quality ingredients. And so it is something that I started in a room in my house 5 years ago and has really exploded beyond that. We now, have served over 8,500 households. I have a full team that runs things for me day to day, as I am campaigning full time, and that ran everything while I was moving back and forth between Knoxville and DC for the year. So my team is really the heart of Knoxville and what makes it so special. I'll also share we have a community classroom where we've been doing so many events and teaching around how people can opt out a little bit of some of the systems that haven't been serving us, whether that is making your own lotion to repairing clothes to, I'd love to do some food preservation and repair workshops. And then we have a creative reuse section, which you can think of as a thrift store for craft supplies. And then we host the Knoxville Rainbow Library as well. So it's a space that has a lot going on, but all in service to our community and all in service to sustainability.
Is this a on-site location or is this like a online platform?
No, it's all on site. So when we started, I did the milkman model. So, but I would always joke with folks that, it's not a milkman, it's a woman, it's not the 50s, it's modern day. And instead of milk, it's personal care and household products. So I used to take full products to people's homes and pick up their empty containers, me and my team. But now we are lucky. We've got an over 3,000 square foot store that folks can come in and refill all of those products in person. So a lot of people will just bring their old shampoo jars and laundry jugs, and then we weigh them and fill them up so they're able to reuse what they already have.
How neat, Michaela. I love that idea. And moms, this is a way, we all think about like, how can we work towards preserving climate, working towards our green issues? But this here is a tangible way. It's something that we do anyways, right? We need to source or procure our household items. And this is most certainly a way that makes sense. So anyway, cool. I love that idea. The folks listening are going to think, why is policy important to the everyday person? How is this going to affect my life? What would you say to that?
I would say that if you don't do politics, politics is doing you. And that's true for policy as well. We can look at my shop and the problem we're solving as a really good example for this. So we are preventing plastic waste from entering the waste stream. But we're doing that with, a few thousand families in the East Tennessee area. Now, we know that on a global level, less than 5% of plastic waste is recycled. We could go into this for a very long time. This is what my PhD is on. I won't bore folks too long with waste management systems. But it is really wonderful to provide people something that they can opt into. A policy question would say, how can we ensure that there is less waste created in the first place and that people are not stuck with choices where they are trying to just minimize harm in their shopping choices, but that the system is taking care of that a little bit and investing in better product design at the front end, better material use that is more easily recyclable, and then properly funding our waste management systems on the back end. So when I was in DC, I actually wrote a bill that is a type of policy called extended producer responsibility that would make corporations, not citizens, responsible for the end-of-life management of the products that they produce. Because you and I, we don't get to decide the makeup of these products, what packaging it's in. We don't get to decide what our end recycling markets, except we only get to decide the products that we bring home. So it really makes sense to start pulling some of these levers at scale to really solve the problems that we care about. You know, I was at a house party earlier this week, and we were talking about, you know, the race and my opponent and all of these different things. And one person said, you know, I was talking with someone, and the reason that they really love Tim Burchett is the system had kind of failed them, and their family member was not able to get a wheelchair through Medicaid, and Tim Burchett helped, you know, their family member get a wheelchair. What would you say to that? And I would say, that is amazing and exactly the type of advocacy we need. And also, cuts to Medicaid and Medicare are going to mean that millions of other families are not going to be able to get that care. It's a question of solving these at individual levels versus population levels. Yeah.
So policy is important, right? I would like to know your position or your stance, your ideas regarding what's happening as far as school vouchers is concerned. A lot of our moms actually have children with disabilities. So to me, I can see how school vouchers are not going to support our kids, and in fact are going to remove money from the public school system, because in our area, a rural area, there aren't even any private schools. And private schools are not obligated to serve all children. What are your thoughts on school vouchers, Michaela?
I think you hit the nail on the head and expressed it exactly the way that I would. And I'll just say that I think that public funds should stay in public services. And that is true whether we are talking about education or healthcare or other policies. These things should not be privatized. And now what we're seeing with our voucher program is not only is there a huge lack of transparency around which, you know, children and schools are benefiting from this, but Tennessee already lags the rest of the country in our spending per student and our investment in our public schools. And this is a system to siphon more money out of our public schools. And I think it's immoral. You know, one of my campaign advisors is a woman in her 80s who has been involved in the labor movement for a really long time. And she tells this story of one of the first times that her husband came home from his union meeting many, many years ago. And he said, "We're voting the wrong way." She said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "We've been voting for Republicans, but we need to start voting for Democrats because Democrats support unions and they support public schools." And he said, "If it weren't for the union, my dad wouldn't have gotten a raise. And my mom, you know, tells a story from this, tells you the moment in time this was, where previously grocery stores had a barrel of the good apples and they had a barrel of the bad apples. And of course, the bad apples were cheaper, and his mom would go and pick through the bad apples. And when his dad got the union fought raise, his mom was able to buy apples from the good barrel. And the other thing was public schools. He said, "My family was poor. I wouldn't have been able to go to school if it weren't for the public schools." And that's true here with this program. And it's the same accessibility issue that you flag. If these institutions are getting public dollars, then they should be held to the same standard as our public schools in terms of accessibility, in terms of test results. And they're simply not, and they're not equipped. Now, of course, this is a Tennessee state legislative issue, and I am running to be a federal congressperson. But that doesn't mean that I don't get to speak out on an issue that is affecting the many people that would be my constituents, and also advocate against a program like this at the federal level where, if they want to export this failed model nationally, which is what they frequently do with Tennessee policies, I'll be there to fight against it.
Yeah, we could see how changes within the Department of Education on a federal level has led to things happening on a state level that was favorable towards the voucher system. So my next question would be on Medicaid. What is your position on Medicaid?
So I think we have a lot of different social programs that exist because we had leaders with moral clarity that said, we are an incredibly well-resourced nation, and the job of our government is to serve and care for our citizens. And Medicaid is an example of that. Medicare is an example of that. Social Security, and SSI. These are all examples of government doing what it is supposed to do, which is serving its people. I was horrified to be on the front lines of this Congress's and this administration's Medicaid cuts this past summer through the reconciliation bill. But I support fully funding Medicaid and Medicare, and also providing a guaranteed universal basic health care option for the American people, with options to still purchase supplementary private insurance if folks want to. But I think it's very clear that the American people deserve dignity and deserve health care, and it is the choice of our leaders up to this point not to provide that at scale.
Tying in with healthcare, I want to explore women's reproductive rights, women's health rights. What would you say to that?
Oh, my goodness. So living in Tennessee, we have one of the most repressive trigger laws in the country that was enacted after the fall of Roe versus Wade. And I understand that for a lot of people, this is a very, very fraught and emotional topic. And I'm always happy to sit down with folks and talk through our points of difference. But I want to really look at the outcomes, right, of the way that we treat women's health and women's reproductive health, especially in Tennessee. So in Tennessee, we have some of the highest maternal mortality in the country, much higher than we experience in other developed countries. And that rate increases even more for Black and brown women. Right now, we are experiencing OBGYNs fleeing our state because they are not able to practice medicine without fear of criminal prosecution. The OBGYN training programs that we have for doctors, because they cannot treat the full spectrum of care, OBGYNs that are getting trained in our state can't be fully certified. Half of the counties in my district do not even have an OBGYN in their county. And then on top of that, Tennessee leads the country in rural hospital closures, which means, I was speaking with someone at the UT Medical Center, and as we've seen all of these rural hospital close, of course, people still need care. And so if you live in an urban center and you say, okay, I'm not being affected by that. No, you are, because what we've seen, I think the number was they had 3,500 births in 1 year. And then the next year they had 5,000 births at that center. And so that's without getting a lot of extra funds and resources and staff. And so the time that you have for each individual patient is going to decrease. So I think we have to look at the outcomes and say, what do we want, right? Right now, I mean, we just had members of our Tennessee state legislature propose legislation that would make getting an abortion a homicide, which in this state is punishable by the death penalty. And I mean, it's so absurd. You're going to be so pro-life that you come around to the idea of killing people, right? So I think for me, what I want is I want a system in which everyone that wants to have children can afford to have them, that they will have robust medical care through their pregnancy and birth and afterwards, that they can afford childcare, which is one of the biggest burdens on people in our state, in our country, that they are supported with well-paying jobs and homes they can afford, and that women and doctors and families, not politicians, are the ones making choices about their families, and women are making choices about their bodies. And this is not something for politicians, particularly older male politicians, to be inserting themselves in. Now, I covered women's health on the Hill for the member that I worked for. And I was very lucky to be in so many briefings with so many experts and people fighting the fight and really explaining what these repressive abortion prevention laws do. And we know that they don't prevent women from getting abortions. Women will still get abortions and they will be unsafe. But what they do is they take away patients' choice. So there was one law, and forgive me for not remembering the state that it was proposed in, but basically said that that any baby or any fetus that was born had to be immediately given resuscitative care. And one of the physicians was talking about how they had a mother, a woman who was pregnant, whose pregnancy was not viable, that her baby, was maybe going to survive for a few minutes after being born. And this mother, this doctor, they were talking through the options, and one of the options was termination earlier on, or the other option was carrying to term and giving birth and holding her child and saying goodbye and hello and going through this process. And what this doctor shared is that under this law, they wouldn't be able to give that mother that moment with their child. They would immediately have to take the child and perform resuscitative measures that will not work, and traumatize this woman who just wants to hold the baby that she carried for the last 9 months. And that's what happens when we have politicians and not doctors and women writing the laws. There are so many unintended consequences. And if we want to protect women and children, we would do it in a comprehensive way, not just in a way that punishes and criminalizes women.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not an expert, but to me, it seems that there are certain rights that women have fought for, such as like the right to vote, secured under the 19th Amendment. The Dobbs decision did overturn Roe versus Wade. I just feel like, why are some of my rights being slowly chipped away at? The whole SAVE Act, Michaela. Now, to me, as I said, I'm not an expert, but that it seems as if there are a lot more hoops that women need to go through in order to prove their citizenship or right to vote. What are your thoughts about the SAVE Act?
Here's the thing, right, is that if politicians had policies that were actually popular, they wouldn't have to try and make it so hard for people to vote. If they had policies they could stand behind, they would want to encourage voting access, not suppress it. And so I think that the biggest thing, I am a scientist. I am all for evidence-based policymaking. If we were experiencing large amounts of fraudulent voting in the United States, and if we had large evidence of non-citizen voting or any of these things, I would agree. We need to take an evidence-based approach to solve this problem. This is not a problem that exists in this country. Over and over and over again, when you look at bipartisan, nonpartisan research, you see evidence of fraudulent or non-citizen voting that are like 0.0000001%. This is a non-issue to solve. It is already illegal for non-citizens to vote. This is already something that our states do well. Now, when it comes to the SAVE Act, they keep trying to pass this and they keep failing. I think, yes, it would make it harder for women. It would also make it harder for people in our rural areas, people that are, lower status economically to prove. There are millions of Americans that do not have the documents laid out in the SAVE Act that would be required to provide proof of voting. And then the other huge issue is that this is being put forth by the party of small government that always talks about cutting bureaucratic red tape. But this bill does not provide any extra resources to our states to run this process. So instead, what you have is making this, 10 times harder without giving state election officials any more money, any more help to do this process, which means that people will be disenfranchised and that our voting systems will be even less equitable than they are now. Now, luckily, the Senate keeps saying, no, we're not going to pass this. And so far, that has continued to be the case. But I think this speaks to this larger trend where instead of voters picking their politicians, we have politicians trying to pick their voters. And we see this through partisan gerrymandering. We see this through all of the ways that Republicans frequently make voting harder for citizens. And it's very clear to me that if we have any chance in solving the problems that we're facing, we need a more engaged electorate, and we need an electorate that votes and that believes their votes matter and whose votes actually matter because the system is not set up in a way that is rigged against them.
Michaela, amidst the chaos, what would be your words of encouragement? What action items would you like to leave listeners with?
I would say that all hope is not lost. And I know people can feel that way, but I've been doing a few different things to maintain my own hope. And one is just, I am relentlessly, stubbornly working to move us forward. I work all the time, and I don't want everyone to work all the time, but I turn these big feelings into action. But what I would say to folks is that when we look at recent autocratic downturns around the world, and researchers have done this because everyone is very interested in why we are seeing a surge of right-wing populism. People are studying this. And what we are seeing is that countries that experience the same kind of autocratic decline that we are experiencing in the United States, that the majority of them experience a U-turn afterwards into democracies that are as strong or even stronger than what they were before. Now, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That happens from people refusing to accept the status quo. Yeah. Now, the other thing is that, if there was anyone that didn't have reason to hope and believe that change is possible, it could be me. I am someone running in the longest held Republican district in the country against an incumbent that regularly gets almost 70% of the vote. But what I shared in some remarks last week at a launch event for the Knox Young Dems is that people have fought against incredible odds in the past, and they've won. And maybe it did not happen as quickly as they wanted, but they did not give up and they did not take themselves out of the fight. I mean, you are from South Africa. I think about the fight against apartheid. And how, if everyone had said, this is just the way things are, and had chosen to accept the status quo, where would we be today? We need an entire generation of people that say, this is the way things are, but this is not the way they have to be. And so the words of hope I would give to people is that A, do not try and solve it all. You cannot. We were talking about this a little bit before we started the podcast today, but like part of this work is that I am going to do my work and trust that you are doing your work, and we each are doing our piece of this puzzle. And so my advice for folks is to pick one issue that keeps you up at night and find a local group that's working on that issue and join them and do this work in community. And if a group does not exist, start one and be creative and refuse to accept the lie that we just have to accept whatever the system throws at us, and know that you can actually be a systems creator, not just a systems recipient. And I think that that's how we get through this. While they terrorize us, we organize, and we just have to outwork them.
As women, I think we are excellent at talking and at organizing. So if there's ever hope, guys, we have that. We know how to talk, and we know how to organize, and we know how to work.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So, Michaela, thank you so much for your time. And listen, I know you don't need luck because you're a worker, and you've got this. And even though we are in West Tennessee, I, for one, strongly support the work that you are doing at Knoxville, as well as your race for the Tennessee 2nd Congressional District. So thumbs up and saddle up, and look forward to hearing about your work to come.
Thank you so much for having me on today. And like we were talking about before we jumped on, our fates are intertwined. And so, and I've shared this with others too, like, I know what it's like to feel unrepresented by your representative in Congress. And so when I am there, I am holding all of these unrepresented constituents with me and fighting for you too.
Thank you, Michaela. Have a great day.
You too.
As always, guys, remember, get to the top of your mountain. This is Marsh Naidu signing off.